Hello there guys. In this video I'll be showing you two new mini dioramas that I'll be building in the near future. Both of which feature figures from one of my favourite Patreon creators, and if you saw my Duck for Lunch video which I produced last year, these figures are from the same source and they are super high quality. This is the first scene, titled Music in World War II. I love that setting of a bomb-damaged street with those American soldiers gathering around that piano. And I'll also be building a couple of figures from this American Western scene. All of these figures will be 3D printed on the brand new PioCreat Halot X1 3D printer. PioCreat have taken over Creality's consumer 3D printing arm, and they sent me this printer free of charge to test it out. It is a prototype version, so some things will change before the final version, but PioCreat say it has a number of new features designed to help beginners in 3D printing. How did I find it? Let's find out. So this is the Halot X1. As you can see, it is a relatively small design, somewhat smaller than my regular 3D printer, which is the Creality Mage Pro. And the first new feature that PioCreat have touted is this build plate. Sometimes with resin printing, removing the completed prints from the build plate can be a nightmare, but this build plate features notches that you can retract back into it or push out of the surface to hopefully loosen your prints. In theory, this should be much easier than chipping away at stuck prints with a metal scraper, so I'm looking forward to trying this out. The build plate also has a handy toolless, screwless insertion mechanism. You just slide it into place and it will lock there once the print starts. The second big feature relates to this cable here and this tube. These are for connecting the AFU, the auto feed unit, which both feeds resin into the vat and drains it out afterwards, and heats the resin automatically. This is another feature I'm really looking forward to testing, because I realised way too late in my 3D printing journey that resin temperature is really important, and that cold resin can and does lead to print failures. In fact, to fix that on my previous printers, I bought a gigantic grow tent, which I put everything in to try and maintain that constant temperature. The third feature is an odd one, and I can only really show you it when the printer is in operation, but this printer sort of works backwards, as it were. Instead of the build plate coming down into the resin vat for the exposure, instead the vat moves up, resin and all, to the build plate. The logic of this is that moving the build plate can get less accurate over time and can cause shifting of layers, especially when you're printing at finer detail levels. We'll see how this works when I try it. So that was a tour of the main features. Before I move down to the garage to set this up and show you it in action, we need to go to the slicing software. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is only support for this printer in Chitubox Pro, and in fact the printer comes with a 90-day license of Chitubox Pro for that reason. Chitubox Basic, the free version, doesn't support this printer. I was told that HaloBox does support this printer if I select, I think it was C29 or something like that as the printer in HaloBox. I couldn't find either printer in there, so I couldn't use it. I did see later on another review that PioCreat have apparently created their own version of HaloBox which supports this printer. I did download that, again I couldn't find support for it, so you are completely stuck on Chitubox Pro for now. What happens when that 90 days paid for license expires? That is potentially a problem. Anyway, I threw my figures into the software. They are made at 1/25th scale, so I calculated the appropriate ratio, 71.4%, to get them down to 1/35th scale. scaled them all, angled them at 45 degrees, which tends to be the best 3D printing. And since things are supposed to work out of the box, I use the automatic support in Tutorbox Pro. As a side note here, you'll notice in the bottom left, Tutorbox Pro says that this print will take about 3.5 hours. I found this figure to be wildly optimistic for every print that I did on this printer. In reality, it was much slower than this. So here we are in the garage with the aforementioned grow tent set up. We've got my wash and cure machine in the background there, we can ignore that. You will notice on the right hand side we've got that white tube hanging down. Previously I connected that to the fan at the rear of my Mage Pro so the resin fumes could be vented externally out of my garage door. Unfortunately the X1 does not have an attachment point for this hose, which to be honest does seem like a bit of a step backwards. One of the other reasons I bought this grow tent was to contain those fumes so I could vent them out. Turning the printer on, we get the standard language selection and then we can connect the printer to a Wi-Fi network. With the Mage Pro you had to use the silly Creality app to upload your 3D files from your desktop or laptop to the cloud and then download them again using the app to the printer, which was an annoying workflow and I never used it. Unfortunately I couldn't test the Wi-Fi capability of the X1 because of the lack of software support that I mentioned earlier, although the PioCreat team, who have been really responsive to my emails, did assure me it will be working in the final version. Equally, although this printer has the ability to update its firmware over the network, over the internet, that feature currently isn't working. Now, time to connect that AFU, that automatic feeding unit. I do have to say the instructions are quite poor on this part. Here they are. Loosen the fastening screws of the fixed slot and disassemble the fixed slot assembly. I have no idea what that means. I didn't disassemble anything. In step 5, install the laser module. The two verticals there should say horizontally. And to be honest, if I'm being picky, on that diagram there, it's really bad to represent the two cables A and B in exactly the same way when one is a rubber resin tube and one is a set of electronic wires for controlling the feed. They look different, they shouldn't be shown the same way on the diagram. To be honest, I don't know what most of those instructions meant. This is what I did. I removed the resin vat. And by the way, I really like the screw-free removal of that vat. Just move those levers to the side, it slots out. And due to the nice keyed shape of the side of the vat, there are no issues getting it back in exactly the right spot. Big improvement over my Mage Pro. Then I connected the black laser module to the tube and to the wire. I put the vat back. If I forget to close those levers for the vat, the lid won't close and the printer won't start. Good design. And then I clipped the black laser module onto the top of the vat. And having done that, I still don't really understand the instructions. My cheap thermometer says the temperature in here is just under 19 degrees, which is close enough to what the printer tells you on the screen there, 20 degrees. I put the resin bottle in the AFU. Now at first, my fault, I didn't realise there was some special lids to do this, so I just dropped the tube straight into the bottle. Then I realised there were some special lids, and this is much more secure. The USB stick goes into the top of the printer, and as the file is selected, you'll notice a very optimistic 2 hours and 11 minutes there for the print time. Remember, the slicing software said 3.5 hours, and that's optimistic. So I don't know where the 2 hours and 11 minutes have come from. One minor but important thing here, you'll notice before I start the print that this screen has defaulted to the local parameters, meaning the printer settings will be used rather than the ones I selected in the slicer. I don't want that. I don't want that, and I would say most of the time you probably won't want that either, so it does seem odd that that will be the default. So I switched back over to the file parameters, I turned on the auto heating and the auto feeding, and once you hit start, the printer feeds a small amount of resin into that vat. This video is in real time, so you can judge the speed for yourself. Only putting a small amount in there makes a lot of sense because it will always be topped up later. And remember, that vat is going to start moving vertically, so you really don't want it full to the brim of resin. This took about 2 minutes to get enough resin into the vat to start the printing. And there we go, you can see both the screen and the vat rising up to meet the build plate. After a while, and I do mean a while, it was around 4 hours and 15 minutes, the printer is ready, we can pop the top open, and we get supplied with this quite handy plastic tray that slides into the resin vat and just stops you dripping resin all over your printer. Small thing, but quite helpful. The tray is a little bit flimsy, I wouldn't put much weight on it, but it is useful for stopping those drips. Now here's that build plate. There are my figures, no obvious failures. And if we give the lever a twist, and I try not to get in the way of the camera, you can see, although the figures are not popping off across the room, I don't really want that, it has loosened them, and I can actually slide them off really easily now. And although I'm using the metal scraper there, I'm not actually using it to loosen the print, I'm just doing it to sort of move it along the build plate. This build plate worked really, really well actually. The only one bit I have a problem with there is that one support raft which just happened to be entirely on the raised notch rather than over an edge, so raising or lowering it made no difference. But overall, really nice design on that build plate, and removing this print was so much quicker than anything I've done before. Okay, so let's take a look at the result of that first batch of printing. Here we have a few of our figures. These have been washed and cured, but I haven't sanded them yet to remove the nubs from the supports. So you'll see on the back of them there are a few little bits there that need sanding down. You see we've got quite a lot of fine detail, things like the helmet strap have come out nicely. The uniform itself looks pretty solid. The fine wire meshing on the helmet there for the figures that have it looks pretty decent too. And I do think there are no real layer lines visible here compared to when I printed similar figures on the Mage Pro. This is quite a high quality lens. This is a macro lens filming at 4K, so it should be able to pick out layer lines if they are visible. Unfortunately though, I did notice a number of print failures on this first batch. All of them were very similar failures. This one is probably the most obvious one. Figure looks okay at first, but if you look at his left arm here, the bottom of that print on his arm is just gone, his elbow is just gone. We have a similar issue here on this one, except the layers have separated and the elbow has sort of floated away there. And indeed on this figure here as well, it looks decent at first, but look at the bottle, that has also sort of slipped, that layer. And again on this guy, he looks okay actually, you've got all the strap detail on the weapon, on his webbing, but here on the rear, just a minor error. But you can see his left elbow there is just ever so slightly displaced again. So I did have a second attempt because it could quite easily be me not properly supporting those figures. So I used the same initial file, but I added some extra support around the elbows. Here's our pianist, and he does appear to have come out better this time. Here are our two figures with the rifles. I've accidentally broken off the barrel of that rifle, but the figures themselves and more importantly their elbows are now correct. I did however have a failure on this second print run of this figure here. I haven't even removed this one from the supports because the failure was so bad. As you can see, the leg has just completely slipped there. No idea why, but it's just obviously just shifted horizontally. And on this figure here, as you can see on his left foot, as it crosses over the other leg, the foot has just ended, it's finished. We don't really have a lower leg even. Something has gone wrong there as well. And again, that area printed fine the first time, but the elbow was incorrect the first time. I did go back and have a third attempt, and I had a complete failure. And in fact a fourth attempt and a complete failure again. Nothing printed in either case. And then I realised, I think, what was going wrong. There were two things I realised at the same time. I changed both variables. Not very scientific, I know, but I was a bit impatient. The first one was the one I mentioned earlier, that default setting of local parameters. I'd forgotten to switch to file parameters. That may have caused an issue with the later prints. However, what I think is more likely is the temperature. As the failed batches were printing, I noticed that the temperature was approaching 35 degrees, which is really at the top end, in fact beyond the top end, of the temperature window for the resin. So you're quite likely to get failures there with it being too hot, just as you are with it being too cold. Now I haven't had that problem before, because I think once a printer gets going, it kind of sustains its own temperature quite well. But of course this one is not just sustaining its temperature, it's also heating the resin, and for some reason I think that temperature, that heating wasn't cutting out, and so it was still heating the resin more and more and more, and the temperature, of course, it's not, the air's not being vented out of that grow tent, certainly not as effectively as it was with the Mage Pro, which had a fan to vent things out, and the temperature really was starting to run away. So I turned off the automatic heating, and I turned off the local parameters and put them on the file parameters, and then I got my final batch out, and they did turn out a lot better. So this is my third batch. Here is the piano. I printed this again on the final batch simply because it printed really well on the first batch, and I wanted to make sure that everything was okay. So as you can see, we've got the fine detail there on the keys. On the back we've got the dimples from the supports, which need sanding down, that's fine. But that should fit relatively well with my pianist and the chair. I did also print a couple of models from that Western diorama that I showed you. For some reason I forgot to scale these down to 1/35th scale, so they're in 1/25th scale, but it doesn't really matter to be honest because they're going to be on their own anyway. This is our dead cowboy. The arrow through his chest has come out perfectly well. Very happy with that detail, no print failures there. Here is our horse, our dead horse. I only noticed when I was editing this video that the right rear leg there is missing. However, I found the piece in the storage box, so it did print properly. I just obviously knocked that off at some point in the post-processing. And then we have the broken cart with the canvas top. The markings here on the side of the cart, they're not the layer lines splitting or anything like that. That is the texture in the wood that's part of the model. And that's supposed to go on the ground like so, with our dead cowboy next to it. And finally the canvas top, which has maintained its cloth-like appearance, and that should go next to the cart. So after a few trials and errors, I have got a complete set of those figures now for the Music in World War II diorama, and I've got the figures that I want for the Western diorama too. It is always a bit hard to review a 3D printer because I'm very aware that there are many variables that can change and affect the quality of the print, or even just the success of the print. So in summary, and of course remembering that this is a prototype machine and things will change for the final version, nice idea, really nice build plate. When it worked, the print quality was good. I'm a bit concerned about the number of failures and just a few ergonomic issues. The issue trying to get the tray in and out, and the lack of a fan at the back. Just a few things that just, it could be an excellent machine. Is it a good machine at the moment? It's certainly okay. I don't think the 16K printing offers much over the 8K printing, so I wouldn't upgrade my existing printer to this one. But I think I would keep my eye out for PioCreat. Creality have always done good printers in the past, and if these few sort of issues could be fixed, maybe the X2 could be that printer to have. I would like to say thank you to PioCreat for providing this printer to me and for allowing me to give my honest opinion. I have been communicating with them via email, and they've always been really good at giving feedback, and they're really appreciative of constructive criticism as well. And thank you to Artejaol for allowing me to use his models in this video. He doesn't sponsor this video, I am one of his paying Patreon members, and I've put a link to his Patreon in the description below. I would also of course like to thank you guys for watching this. I hope you enjoyed the video, and special thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members who provide support to this channel on an ongoing basis. It really is greatly appreciated, guys, and it's true to say that I couldn't do a lot of things I do without your support. In a future video, hopefully not too far away, we will see these figures that I've printed today in a mini diorama form. So do stay tuned if you want to see that. In the meantime, thank you again everyone for watching, and until next time, have fun modelling.